Somewhere in the freezing dark over southwest Washington on the night before Thanksgiving 1971, a man in a business suit and a thin black tie walked to the back of a moving passenger jet, worked a lever that lowered the rear staircase into the 200-mile-an-hour slipstream, and stepped off into the storm with $200,000 strapped to his body. He had a parachute on his back. He had no light, no plan anyone ever found, and beneath him, thousands of feet of black rain, forest, and river. He was never seen again. No body, no parachute, no name that was ever proven. In the decades since, the FBI would run one of the longest manhunts in its history and never close it. He remains the only person to ever hijack an American airliner and simply vanish. This is the story of the man the world calls D.B. Cooper, reconstructed minute by minute in cinematic 3D. It began quietly. On the afternoon of November 24, 1971, a man in his mid-40s walked up to the Northwest Orient counter at Portland International Airport and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle under the name Dan Cooper. He paid cash. He wore a dark business suit, a white shirt, a clip-on tie with a mother-of-pearl pin, and carried a black attaché case. Witnesses would remember him as calm, polite, unremarkable, the kind of tired businessman nobody looks at twice. He boarded Flight 305, a Boeing 727, took a seat near the back, ordered a bourbon and soda, and lit a cigarette. It was a short hop, barely 30 minutes in the air. Shortly after takeoff, he handed the nearest flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, a folded note. She was used to lonely businessmen slipping her their phone numbers, so she dropped it into her pocket without reading it. He leaned toward her and said quietly, so no one else could hear, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." She read it. The note said, in neat capital letters, that he had a bomb in his briefcase, and that she should sit down beside him. When she did, he opened the case just enough for her to see a nest of red cylinders, wires, and a large battery. Then he dictated his terms, calmly and precisely, and had her write them down for the cockpit. He wanted $200,000 in American $20 bills. He wanted 4 parachutes, 2 main and 2 reserve. And he wanted a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft the instant it landed. It was the demand for 4 parachutes that would haunt investigators because it implied he might force one of the crew or a hostage to jump with him. That single detail meant the FBI could not simply hand him sabotaged, unusable chutes and hope he died on the way down. Everything about him was deliberate and informed. He knew the aircraft. He knew exactly what he was going to ask it to do, and he never once raised his voice. The pilot radioed the demands to the ground, and Northwest Orient made a decision that stunned everyone. Pay him. While the 727 circled Seattle for nearly 2 hours, burning fuel and buying time, the FBI raced to assemble the ransom, 10,000 unmarked $20 bills, each serial number secretly photographed on microfilm, so the money could be traced the moment it ever appeared. On the ground, the jet taxied to a dark, isolated stretch of tarmac. Cooper let all 36 passengers off, along with 2 of the flight attendants, in exchange for the money and the parachutes. He kept the pilot, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, and Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant who had stayed with him. Then he gave the cockpit his flight plan, and it was unlike anything they had heard. Fly toward Mexico City, stay below 10,000 feet, keep the landing gear down, the wing flaps at 15 degrees, and the cabin unpressurized, and leave the aft air stair, the staircase under the tail, unlocked. He was configuring a jetliner for a single purpose no one had ever attempted, to be jumped out of in flight. At around 7:40 in the evening, the 7927 lifted off again into heavy rain, gear down, and leveled at 10,000 feet. Cooper ordered the crew into the cockpit and told them to stay there and pull the curtain. Alone in the darkened cabin, he tied the money bag to himself, strapped on a parachute, and pried open the aft staircase, which unfolded into a screaming, freezing slipstream. Outside, the temperature at altitude was well below zero. The aircraft was doing close to 200 miles an hour, and the sky was a wall of black cloud and rain. At around 8:13, the crew felt it. A sharp bump in the tail, a change in pressure, the aircraft nosing up as a weight left the back. Then nothing. When Flight 305 finally landed near Reno, the stairs were still down, the cord was flapping, and the cabin was empty. Cooper was gone, somewhere in a 28-mile-wide corridor of forest, ravine, and river, in the dark, in a storm. On his seat, he had left 2 of the 4 parachutes, the black clip-on tie, and 8 cigarette butts. The FBI named the case Hijacked, and it grew into one of the largest and longest investigations in the Bureau's history. Agents flooded the wilderness south of Seattle. Soldiers walked search lines. Submarines and divers combed the bed of the Columbia River. Over the years, investigators interviewed more than 1,000 people and seriously pursued dozens of suspects. There was Richard McCoy, who pulled a nearly identical hijack and parachute robbery just months later and was caught. There was Kenneth Christensen, a former paratrooper who worked for Northwest and whose brother was convinced. There was Robert Rackstraw, a con man and pilot the FBI circled for years, and Dwayne Webber, whose dying words to his wife were, "I'm Dan Cooper." Experienced skydivers argued that jumping from a jet into a storm at night, in a business suit and slip-on shoes, with an untested parachute, was close to suicide. And yet no body was ever found, no suit, no chute, and for 9 years, not a single one of the 10,000 marked bills appeared anywhere in the world. Then, in February 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was raking a sandy bank of the Columbia River called Tennebar, clearing a spot for a campfire when his fingers found something a few inches down. 3 bundles of rotting $20 bills, still held by rubber bands, $5,800, their serial numbers matching Cooper's ransom exactly. It was the only piece of the money ever recovered, and instead of solving the case, it deepened it. The bills lay miles from where Cooper was thought to have landed, and the way the river deposits sand argues they arrived years after the jump, from a direction that shouldn't be possible. Decades later, scientists studying the clip-on tie he left behind found microscopic particles of titanium and rare earth metals, hinting he may have worked somewhere in the aerospace industry. Amateur sleuths chase the case to this day, but the DNA came back inconclusive. The name never came, and in 2016, after 45 years, the FBI formally closed its file, unsolved. Whoever he was, D.B. Cooper stepped out of that aircraft and achieved the one thing almost every criminal wants, and almost none ever get. He simply disappeared. Next time on Masterplan.